History of my oldest ancestors of whom I am very proud descend. July 22, 1137, takes place in Bordeaux, the marriage between Louis VII, King of France, my 29th and 31st grandfather, and the remarkable Eleanor of Aquitaine, my 28th, 29th and 31st grandmother, Queen of France and Queen of England, Duchess of Aquitaine, Countess of Poitiers, one of the richest and most powerful women of the Middle Ages, mother of the kings of England, Richard I Lionheart and John Sem Terror, and great-grandmother of Dom Afonso III, King of Portugal, my 25th and 26th grandfather. Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen Consort of France and Queen of England, Duchess of Aquitaine, Countess of Poitiers, was born in Bordeaux, April 1, 1122, and died in Poitiers, March 31, 1204. She was the daughter of William X, the Saint, Duke of Aquitaine, and Eleanor of Chartres, paternal granddaughter of William IX, the Troubadour, Duke of Aquitaine, and Matilda Philippa of Toulouse, and maternal granddaughter of Amerigo I, Viscount of Catalerelt and Morbihan of Isle-Bouchard. Eleanor of Aquitaine was one of the richest and most powerful women of the Middle Ages, having been Duchess of Aquitaine and Countess of Poitiers in her own suo jure right. She was also Queen Consort of France, from 1137 to 1152, as wife of Louis VII, King of France, and then Queen of England, from 1154 to 1189, as wife of Henry II, Plantagenet, in addition to being matriarch of the Plantagenet dynasty, which ruled England between 1154 and 1485. She was the eldest daughter of William X of Aquitaine, whom she succeeded in 1137, and Eleanor of Chartres. Eleanor of Aquitaine was the patron of important literary figures such as Bernard de Ventadorn, Wace, and Benoit de Saint-Maur, as well as several Catholic religious orders and congregations such as the Abbey of Fontevraud. He led armies several times during his life and was one of the leaders of the Second Crusade. Upon becoming Duchess of Aquitaine at the age of 14, Eleanor became the most sought-after bride in Europe, having married, 3 months after becoming Duchess, King Louis VII of France, with whom she had 2 daughters. As Queen of France, Eleanor took part in the Second Crusade, traveling to Palestine leading the army of Aquitaine and Poitou against the forces of Islam. After 15 years as Queen of France, she asked Pope Eugene III for an annulment of her marriage, an annulment granted on March 21, 1152. Based on the couple's consanguinity, they were 4th cousins. Her 2 daughters were declared legitimate and their custody was granted to Louis, while Eleanor's lands were returned to her. Shortly after the annulment, Eleanor married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, on the 18th of May, 1152 in Poitiers Cathedral. 2 years later, at Christmas 1154, she and her husband, now Henry II, were crowned King and Queen of England at Westminster Abbey in London. During the first 13 years of marriage, Henry and Eleanor had 8 children. However, in 1171, they fell out over his extramarital affairs, and he ended up arresting her in 1173 for supporting the revolt of her sons Henry the Younger, Richard, and Geoffrey against their father. Eleanor was only released on July 6, 1189, when her husband died and her second son Richard Lionheart ascended the throne of England. As Queen Mother, Eleanor acted as regent of England and Normandy when Richard went on the Third Crusade, having negotiated his ransom when he was imprisoned in Austria. Upon the accession of her son João Sem Terror, in 1199, Leonor participated in the last battles to guarantee her permanence on the throne. And after an intense life of 82 years, being Queen of France and England consecutively, she took the veil at the Abbey of Fontevraud, where she ended up dying as a nun on March 31, 1204. Biography. Eleanor of Aquitaine was born into the most literate and cultured court of her time. His grandfather was William IX, the Troubadour, Duke of Aquitaine, one of the first troubadours and vernacular poets. He was also an extremely cultured man, who passed on his taste for culture to his heir son William X, who, in turn, offered an exceptional education to his 2 daughters. Leonor and Petronilla were fluent in around 8 languages, learned mathematics and astronomy, and discussed laws and philosophy together with the doctors of the church. This education, exceptional because they were women, and at a time when most rulers were illiterate, allowed them to develop a critical spirit and political sagacity, useful especially to Leonor, who would govern herself. William X also enjoyed involving his heir Leonor in the various aspects of governance, taking her on visits throughout his territories. Family and descent. From the first marriage, held in Bordeaux on July 22, 1137, between Eleanor of Aquitaine and Louis VII, King of France, they had two daughters. Marie de Franca, married in 1164 to Count Henry I of Champagne and Troyes, my 28th and 30th grandparents. Alice of France, married in 1164 to Count Theobald V of Blois and Chartres. From Eleanor of Aquitaine's second marriage to Henry II Plantagenet, King of England, my 28th, 29th and 31st grandfather, they had 8 children. William IX, Count of Poitiers, died at the age of 3 from convulsions. Henry, the young co-king of England, married Margaret of France, with no surviving descendants. Matilda, Duchess of Saxony, married Henry, the Lion, Duke of Saxony and Bavaria. Richard I of England, Heart of the Lion, married Berengaria of Navarre. Geoffrey II, Duke of Brittany, married Constance, Duchess of Brittany. Leonor Plantagenet, Queen of Castile, married Alfonso VIII, King of Castile, my 27th, 28th and 30th grandparents. Joan, Queen of Sicily, married for the first time with William II of Sicily, with no surviving descendants. She married for the second time with Raimondo VI of Toulouse, with descendants. Joachim Terra married Isabel de Angoulême. Eleanor of Aquitaine was the grandmother of King Henry III of England, great-grandmother of Edward I of England, great-great-grandmother of Edward II of England, great-great-grandmother of Edward III of England, great-grandmother of Richard II of England. And he is the ancestor of all the British monarchs of the dynasties subsequent to the Plantagenet, of all the kings of the House of Lancaster and the House of York, both branches of the Plantagenet dynasty. As well as the Tudor dynasty, the result of the union between the Lancaster and Yorks of Welsh origin, the Scottish House of Stuart, the German House of Hanover and the House of Windsor, including the current King Charles III of England. Through her daughter Eleanor Plantagenet, Princess of England, my 27th, 28th and 30th grandmother, Eleanor of Aquitaine is the ancestor of all the Iberian and French royal houses. The granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine, Berengaria of Castile, my 26th, 27th and 29th grandmother, inserted her blood into the Spanish royal lineage. Her other granddaughter Blanche of Castile became Eleanor of Aquitaine, ancestor of all the kings of France from Louis IX of France onwards, and by her granddaughter Dona Urraca of Castile, Queen of Portugal, my 26th and 27th grandmother, married to King Dom Afonso II of Portugal, my 26th and 27th grandfather, all the kings of Portugal from Dom Afonso III of Portugal, my 25th and 26th grandfather, descend from Leonor of Aquitaine. And through her daughter Matilda of England, Duchess of Saxony, Eleanor of Aquitaine became the ancestor of dozens of German royal and noble houses, including the houses of Habsburg, Wettin, Wittelsbach, Hohenzollern and Hesse. Through the Queen's German descendants, her blood was carried into the Scandinavian royal families. Through other lineages, Eleanor of Aquitaine is also the ancestor of most of the Italian and Slavic royal and noble houses. Louis VII, the younger, King of France, was born in 1120 and died on the Isle of France, Paris, on September 18, 1180. He was the son of Louis VI, King of France and Adelaide of Savoy, paternal grandson of Philip I, King of France and Bertha of the Netherlands, and maternal grandson of Umberto II, the Fat, Count of Savoy and Mariana and Gisela of Burgundy. Louis VII, also called Louis the Younger, was king of the Franks from 1137 until the date of his death. He was the son of King Louis VI and his wife Adelaide of Savoy. He married Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful and richest women in Europe. She brought with her the vast Duchy of Aquitaine as part of her dowry, temporarily extending the Capetian lands to the Pyrenees. However, the union was annulled in 1152 due to consanguinity, despite having 2 daughters. Marie de Franca, who married Count Henry I of Champagne and Troyes, my 28th and 30th grandparents, in 1164. Alice of France, who married Count Theobald V of Blois and Chartres in 1164. Eleanor of Aquitaine immediately married Henry Plantagenet, Count of Anjou, after the annulment, to whom she gave Aquitaine and with whom she had 5 children. Henry ascended the English throne in 1154 and ruled a large empire, marking the beginning of the long rivalry between France and England. During the reign of Louis VII, the University of Paris was founded and participated in the disastrous Second Crusade. Louis VII and his advisor, Abbot Suger, attempted a greater centralization of power and favored the development of French Gothic architecture, notably represented in the construction of Notre Dame Cathedral. Louis VII died on September 18, 1180 and was succeeded by his only son, Philip II. Marriage of Louis VII degrees with Eleanor d'Aquitaine. Before he died, Louis VI had arranged his son's marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine, the heiress of the Duchy of Aquitaine, 1122–1204, daughter of William X of Poitiers and Eleanor of Catalairalt. The wedding took place in Bordeaux, on July 22, 1137, with advantages for both bride and groom. In the conflictive time of noble robbers who ravaged the country, terrorizing the populations and neighboring domains, Eleanor obtained the necessary protection for her duchy. Louis almost tripled the crown's domains, as his bride was Lady of Aquitaine, Gascony, Poitou, Auvergne, Bordeaux, Agen, Saintonge, Limousin, Angoumois, and Dordogne. The king's character, devout, ascetic, naive, rude and not very vigorous, did not suit his strong, intelligent, refined, and sensual bride, despite the fact that for 10 years they seemed to live without serious conflicts. The union, from which 2 daughters, Maria and Alice, were born, was doomed to failure. A statement is attributed to Eleanor that she thought she had married a king, but discovered that she had married a monk.